Okay, we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our community show, Unlock the Power of Reltio Enrichment with the D&B data blocks. We have our very own Jacques Lateo who will be speaking today. He is one of our senior product managers. Just a couple housekeeping items. Please keep yourself on mute unless you are asking a question. All questions should be asked in the chat, or of course, take yourself off of mute to ask. Just remember to put yourself back on mute after you're done. And our community shows will be recorded and posted to our Reltio community. So keep an eye out for those posts. They will be posted as blogs. Um, just for this slide is intended to outline our general product direction. It's for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon in making purchasing decisions, nor be incorporated or assumed in any contract. I will pass off to Jacques, who will kick us off with our discussion. Oh, you're on mute, Jacques.
Thank you, Sarah. Welcome everyone to this community webinar where we're going to be talking about the Reltio Enrichment with D&B Data Blocks product that we launched with our 2024.2 release. You are probably well versed with Reltio Data Cloud, and you're aware that the success of a customer-based strategy depends on having complete, current, and accurate customer information. And having incomplete records or inaccurate data can lead to poor planning, incorrect sales alignment, lost opportunities, inaccurate discounting, credit risk assessments. So we do understand that your core data needs to be accessible, it needs to be trusted, reliable, and it also needs to be kept up to date, and it needs to keep up with the pace of your business. And that's where our enrichment products can start adding value here. Next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you. So as you know, our platform consolidates all of your information, your customer data, centralizes data from multiple sources into a single trusted repository of interoperable data. And with the Reltio enrichment, with D&B Data Blocks product, you can easily match and enrich these customer profiles, creating comprehensive, reliable 360-degree profiles. The enrichment product is built on Reltio Data Cloud, again, delivering that trusted consumer or customer data from our industry-leading business provider or data provider, which is Dun & Bradstreet. And the D&B can help you learn more about your customers' firmographics, demographics. It offers relevant insights to help your business improve customer engagement, upsell to the broader organization. Next slide, please, sir. One of the main benefits here for using a pre-built integration like the Reltio enrichment with D&B Data Blocks product is that you can accelerate time to value. So this dovetails well with our methodology or our implementation methodology. You can demonstrate ROI rapidly by deploying this low-code, no-code solution and getting it up and running very quickly in your lower environments, and then even promoting upwards, quickly to production. So accelerating time to value, demonstrate ROI quickly. Of course, you bridge gaps in your data by leveraging the curated D&B data. And obviously, you're leveraging insights from these enriched records, increasing revenue, reducing risk, improving customer experience, and even driving efficiency. So your sales and marketing teams, for example, could benefit from having that complete customer and prospect profiles augmented with the D&B data that Dun & Bradstreet provides. Marketing can be more or perform more robust segmentation, targeting of industries. They have accurate revenue and employee data. Sales could better align territories with opportunity areas. Um, and let's see, sales can also find that white space across customer hierarchies to uncover more of those cross-sell and upsell opportunities by leveraging that corporate linkage or relationship information. So using Reltio enrichment with DNB, you can create a complete picture of your customer and deliver superior customer services. With this complete data at your fingertips, marketing can run account-based campaigns and ensure that customers receive more of a personalized and timely communication. Do we have a question yet or no? Okay, never mind. Next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you. So some key features that this integration provides. Of course, you get the enrichment. This is a Reltio integration hub-based solution. So it's very rapid to deploy. It's easily configurable. You can be up and running in minutes. There is also the ability to have some flexibility in configuration. So we provide some out-of-the-box configuration options. I'll be showing you in a live demo a little later. We have some out-of-the-box notifications, error handling, logging, that sort of thing. And the fact that it's built upon Reltio Integration Hub allows um, resources with the correct skill sets to go in and even customize and maybe tailor the recipes. So a use case might be mapping additional attributes from a supported data block, or removing attributes that are maybe not of interest. Those can be unmapped, to even adding additional data blocks beyond the supported data blocks that come out of the box. We also have, of course, the rich data that the DMB provides, including the hierarchies and relationships. And then we also support Dun& Bradstreet monitoring, and we can talk a little bit about that a little later. We have 4 modes of operation. So there is the on-demand or UI buttons that most of you may be familiar with. We'll cover this in a demo shortly. We have a new mode that we haven't had in previous integrations with DMB, which is a near real-time mode. This mode we're excited about. What it lets you do is automatically enrich profiles kind of behind the scenes as records are being created or updated in Reltio Cloud. So there is a queue, or we have a streaming destination. So for example, an SQS queue, messages get placed into the queue for entity create or changed events. And then behind the scenes, they are programmatically enriched with DNB. So that's the second mode we support, and that is new. We have the batch mode, which you might also be familiar with. Batch is used for enriching large volumes of data in one fell swoop, typically used for an initial data load or say the onboarding of new sources. This will leverage Reltio export behind the scenes, and it leverages Dun and Bradstreet's APIs that support bulk enrichment. The fourth mode of operation is monitoring, and for this, you'll have to set up a monitoring registration with DNB, and what it lets you do is for organizations that are being monitored, so you would have registered these with DNB by DUNS number. Any updates that DNB has to those organizations will be pushed. So there'll be a data file that's prepped from DNB. It's sent over through a cloud storage like an S3 bucket where both parties have mutual access to that bucket. And then our recipes will pick up those monitoring changes and apply them to your master profiles in Reltio. So that's the fourth mode, fourth and final mode. The other key feature we support here is a potential match only mode. This is different to maybe what we've had in the past. So there is basically a flag in the properties or in the recipe properties that overrides the confidence codes that you might be familiar with. We have a lower confidence code that creates potential matches. There's a higher confidence code where the enrichment results are allowed to auto merge with the master profile. But also we created an override that lets you run everything strictly in a potential match mode. It can be useful for POCs or some analysis, dev, test efforts, that sort of thing. We're also excited about another feature which allows you to match and enrich multiple profiles in Reltio against the same DNB organization. So if two profiles in Reltio are matched to a single DNB profile that have the same DUNS number, you'll actually be allowed to enrich both of those profiles. Previously, there was a limitation that didn't allow this. The only caveat to that is you can only add one of them to the hierarchy in order to maintain hierarchy, and data integrity. But those are some key net new features over previous integrations that we have had. Next slide, please. Some things to know. The Reltio enrichment with DNB data blocks is a add-on product, so it would require an entitlement. And it is available with our MDM and 360 data products. So not available in or with entity resolution products. It is supported out of the box with our B2B and FinServe velocity packs. It also requires RIH or an RIH entitlement to be present. And it's also important to know that RIH task utilization will count towards existing entitlements. So whatever tasks are consumed as part of this integration will count towards RH entitlement. And the same thing holds true with API utilization. So for example, when we're ingesting data back from DNB, we're actually leveraging the Reltio entities API. So those requests will count towards your existing quotas and limits. It's also worth calling out that this product requires a DNB license. So the services required here would be at minimum identity resolution, like as a core service. And then for data blocks themselves, we have company information, hierarchies and connections. Those are mandatory data blocks. And then as optional data blocks, we support diversity insights and principles and contacts. Fine print, additional data blocks can also be added through recipe customization, and this will require RIH skill sets as well as familiarity with Python and Ruby code. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to take a quick look at the high-level product architecture here. On the left-hand side, you have Reltio Data Cloud, so that's your tenant. In the middle, we have Reltio Integration Hub, which is the technology that this integration is built off of. And to the right, we can see Dun & Bradstreet with the services that they provide. If we look at the top set of arrows, we can see a batch request going out. So if we're using batch mode of integration, data is basically exported from the Reltio platform using our native export service. The data is then transformed and prepped within Reltio Integration Hub. The files or the records themselves are, carved up, chunked out into smaller batches, and then sent to DNB for enrichment using their batch APIs. Once the data is returned from DNB, those data files are then picked up and written back, they're processed and then written back to the Reltio Data Cloud tenant on the left. So that would be the batch mode of integration or the batch flow. Real time is similar or near real time and on demand. This transaction it's a single transaction, so it's per record. If a button is pushed in the UI or a message is consumed from the near real-time queue, it's basically sent to DNB for enrichment using the APIs, and this is you know a synchronous operation versus batch, which is pretty much asynchronous. And then at the bottom here, we have the scheduled monitoring updates. So this is a little different because rather than making requests to Dun& Bradstreet for some data we have already, the monitoring integration or mode of operation relies on that registration that was created with DNB. So Dun& Bradstreet will actually create a data file. They will push it to S3, and then the recipes will pick up or detect that those files have been placed in S3, and then those files are processed and the results written back to Reltio Data Cloud. Okay, so I do see a couple of questions coming in. Thanks for these. First question is, do you have to pick batch or near real time as part of the configuration? So Jainan, you technically you can run both modes kind of side by side, but it really depends on the use case. The recommendation is to use batch only for the initial enrichment. So your IDL into Reltio, or when onboarding sources and you have large, volumes of data. Near real time is primarily going to be used kind of on an ongoing basis. But it's totally acceptable, based on requirements for the company to say, hey, we're not going to implement near real time. We don't really need it. Instead, we might do a periodic batch, maybe bi-weekly or monthly or quarterly. And batch can actually be scheduled in Reltio Integration Hub. So you can pick whatever works best for you, but it is recommended, yes, to kind of only use batch for those large volumes of data, and then either shift to near real time or monitoring on an ongoing basis. Monitoring would be the suggested approach. Kurt, I see a question. The DMB data blocks diagram on the right seems to direct plus data blocks. They are different products. They are different licenses, yes, but technically it's still kind of the direct plus service. The data blocks are actually part of the request parameters. So DNB did keep the same services, same APIs, and they added support for data blocks and using the same API and the same services. So you still see data blocks being referenced in the Direct Plus documentation on DNB side. So Chetan, so does DNB CMP ELK of operation remain the same? So with it, let me see if I understand your question correctly. If you're asking about the existing Direct Plus connector that we used to have, that will remain the same. It will continue to be operational, and Dun & Bradstreet are going to continue supporting those services. Um, However, the direction both DNB, that DNB is going with this is that they want to position new deals to go on or off of data blocks. So they are pushing for that service, but they are not deprecating the older service um, as of yet. So everything should continue to function. If your question was more about is CMP, ELK part of data blocks. It's not. They are separate products on the DMB side. Okay, awesome. So with that, I think we can shift to a live demo here. I am going to, okay, bring up my screen. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so we'll go ahead and just jump into the demo, and then what I'd like to do after that is actually shift to Reltio Integration Hub and show you kind of how this is working under the covers and what a high level deployment and configuration looks like. So here I'm in a tenant, Reltio Data Cloud tenant, and I have a record that I have prepared here. So it's a fairly lightweight record. As you can see here, I just have an organization name and an address for a Whole Foods in New York. And I'm going to go ahead and press the Get Company Information here. So as you can see, we have 3 buttons in the sidebar, and I will go ahead and explain what these are real quick. So the Get Match button is always going to retrieve the best match from DNB, but create it as a potential match. So that's kind of that potential match only mode. It will only ever create a potential match so that you make sure that you're not updating an MDM profile. So it's kind of like a read-only mode, right? You're obtaining the match, you can look at it, you can review it in the potential match screen, and then you can action it. You can either merge it or you can discard that match. With Get Company Info, which is the button I pressed here, Get Company Info is going to be based off your configured confidence code thresholds. So in the recipe, which I will show you after this, I have 2 confidence codes that are set. I have a potential match confidence code threshold, which I believe is set to 6 out of the box. So that means a match of a confidence code 6 or above will be created as a potential match. Anything that comes less than a 6 will be discarded. But then I also have an automatic match or merge confidence code threshold, which out of the box we've set to 8. So what this means is now if a match comes in at an 8 or higher, it will automatically be accepted and therefore merged with the master profile. And that is what happened in this case. So we had a match that was of confidence code 10, which is higher than an 8. So this profile got enriched directly. It was updated with the results. If the match was returned at, say, a 7 or a 6, well, I would have expected to see a potential match. If it was less than a 6, I would have ended up receiving a verification status of no match found. Because there was not a match that was found at the confidence code threshold that we wanted. And I'll show you that shortly. So as you can see, within a matter of seconds, we have the enrichment results visible on the screen. The profile has been enriched. We can see that we have a Whole Foods Market Inc. here. We have a URL that we did not have previously. Of course, we have the unique identifier in the DNB universe. We have the DUNS number here. The verification status is appended to the profile so that we know that the profile was enriched, who the provider was, and when that enrichment occurred. And then we start to get some of that valuable information. So we have industry classification codes using various classification systems and standards. So we have, our NAICS code, DNB codes, um, ISIC and NACE classifications and codes. We get some information about the organization, is it operating? Is it a branch? Is it a standalone organization? Is it marketable? We get the employee information, some financial figure information. Of course, we got our match confidence code, which we saw earlier, employee and sales revenue amounts. And then we also have our hierarchy information. So we know in this case that Whole Foods Market Inc. here in New York is actually, let's take a look at this. So its headquarter organization would be this Whole Foods Market Inc. And then ultimately the domestic ultimate is going to be Amazon. And also the global ultimate is also Amazon because it's in the US here. We also have some information about the linked organizations, so you have the domestic alt and the global ultimate details, some sales revenue and employee counts. What we can also do here now is we see a third button, which is Get Hierarchy and Contacts. We can go ahead and click this button, and this will also retrieve now or create the hierarchy. So if we didn't have a record for Amazon, I would expect that record to be created and linked by means of a relationship being created. And if you want, the behavior of these buttons can be configured. So you can have all these things happen in one fell swoop. If you wanted to group the hierarchy and contacts, for example, with the company info, if you didn't want get match or that wasn't useful to you, or you always wanted your data stewards to always work in potential match mode, you can kind of disable this button and make sure they get the match first. So it is configurable, but this is what we deliver out of the box. Um, and then when we're using other modes of enrichment like batch is automatically going to include company info and hierarchy and contacts, plus any other data blocks you have configured. Maybe it's diversity insights um, or some other customized block. And same thing for monitoring. You'll also receive the same core set of attributes. So we've looked for or configured the different modes of operation to have parity in terms of how they behave and what data elements are actually mapped in. So as a result of clicking the Get Hierarchy and Contacts, you can see now, excuse me, you can see that the hierarchy has been added here, and we have additional organizations now that have been linked through the linkage, and I can go and click through and browse and look at some of these. So Amazon Inc., this should have been the Global Ultimate. This was created as a result of the enrichment. So this is created as a shell record. I didn't have this record in my universe yet, but it's been created for the purposes of creating this linkage. And then, your business users can go ahead and enrich um, at different levels of the hierarchy as well. Or if you were using um, things like batch or near real time, then this profile could have been enriched programmatically as well, kind of behind the scenes. It just depends on how you have it configured. So here, as a business user, I just click get company info, and now I've also enriched the global ultimate here, and we can see all the additional data elements that were provided over and above that shell record that was created as a result of the get hierarchy and contact operation. So that's what I have prepared for a live demo, and this was the on-demand mode of operation. Let me take a look. There's a question here. So if the auto merge threshold is set to 8 in the recipe, I suppose we would need DNB. Correct. So, Kurt, the recipe is basically going to take the single best match that DNB provides out of the box. It's configured as the record that has the highest confidence code and use that to write the response. Um, so yes, we would well DNB can return more than one candidate actually when we make the request, but we would select the best one.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so that's what I've prepared for a demo that was on demand. Near real time is going to function in the same way, but it would require me to have the trigger recipe enabled and the queue enabled, which I do have, but then it would mess up the on-demand demo because as soon as you create the record or you update the record, it's going to be enriched programmatically. So that doesn't give me enough latency to demo on demand. But near real time, continuous, think about it as it's always running behind the scenes. Records could be enriched on average between, say, uh, say 6 seconds to about 5 or 6 minutes. It just depends on how many events are in that queue. Um, and there is also an inbuilt polling limit within RIH so that that queue is polled, say, every 5 minutes. So depending on when the record was created, you can see some latency from seconds to minutes. But that's near real time. Batch obviously takes a bit more time, so it's not conducive to a demo. But I'll show you how that works here as I shift to RIH. Are there any questions regarding on demand or anything we've covered thus far before I switch over? Okay, I see one from Jane Ann. Can you add to these records contact preferences, for instance? So when you say can you add, are we talking about additional sources contributing to this record, just like a regular MDM profile?
Yes, like
Mm.
if you've got this record and you're working with this company and they set some contact preferences, can you add, some fields to this screen where the data steward or relationship manager can input those contact preferences?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So what I'm demoing here is an out-of-the-box configuration that is based off our latest B2B velocity pack. Um, so it's all pre-configured in terms of a data model as well as the UI configuration. So during implementation, you have the flexibility of extending the data model. You can add any attributes. I believe we already have like consent and communication preferences within the data model. Um, so you can easily write data to those fields. That is not a problem. The UI is customizable as well. So you can display different elements in different areas of the screen. You can group them in ways that meet your needs and place them as you see fit on the screen. And this is very much a normal profile in Reltio. So the record I showed you for Whole Foods, for example, that could have been a record that was coming through or contributed by Salesforce, for example. And then
Mm-hmm.
that record was enriched, but it is still very much an MDM profile that you can still work with. So as a data steward, let's say you are allowing your data stewards to come in and curate information, right? They can actually go into the editing mode here and they can make changes. So let me see if I have a pref. There should be something.
So I imagine those communication preferences would be stored in a widget or a block like this.
Yes, we can put
Mhm.
them in a widget or a block. That's not a problem. And then obviously your each tenant has a configuration. You have a tenant configuration where
Mhm.
you can set up things like survivorship rules. So
Uh-huh.
these are all configurable and can be looked at during implementation time. But out of the box right now, we would be surviving or operationalizing values that come from Dun and Bradstreet, for example, over values that are contributed by your source. So if I flipped back to the Whole Foods example, I previously had an organization name of Whole Foods Market. So I can use the color coding here. In this case, I created this profile manually in Reltio. So you will see that the crosswalk here or the data contributor is Reltio, but this could read anything else. This could have been Salesforce that sent in this record. And after the Dun& Bradstreet enrichment occurred, you can see that the operational value here, or the value that's being survived and utilized for this profile, is actually the one that was sent in by Dun& Bradstreet, which is Whole Foods Market Incorporated, or Inc. And these rules here are configurable. So this just happens to be the way we set it up out of the box. But again, customers and implementations, you have some flexibility then to tweak these configurations to suit your business needs. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to quickly shift gears here into Reltio Integration Hub. So this is where um, our product or the technology that our product is built off of, and this is where it would be deployed. So essentially, after provisioning within your tenant, you would have a project such as this Reltio enrichment with DNB data blocks, and it contains a number of artifacts and recipes. So there are some connections to begin with. This is where you will have a connection to Dun& Bradstreet. So there is a license. Dun& Bradstreet provides you with some API keys and secrets, and you will set up that connection in here in connections. So right now the key and secret are obfuscated, so it's okay for me to show you. But you will input your keys here, and you will also select the data blocks you are licensed for. So Dun& Bradstreet has different data block levels that provide slightly different sets of information. For company info, that's a core data block. You will need this at least level 1, which is the lowest level, but we also support up to level 3. We support principals and contacts as an optional data block. You have hierarchies and connections, which is mandatory, and then diversity insights is an optional block. So when I set up the connection to DNB, I have to specify what blocks I'm licensed for, and then I press connect, and that will ensure that I can now make requests to the DNB real-time APIs. Similarly, there are some other connections here. For monitoring, you will need an S3 bucket. This is going to be mutually configured. So you will have, for example, your security teams configure an IAM policy to allow DNB to access that S3 bucket and maybe a particular path where you want them to write files to. And similarly, there's a one-time setup required with DNB so that they can also create that IAM policy to be able to access your bucket and write the data. So it's that mutual trust that's set up. And once that is configured, you can basically connect to a bucket, either using an IAM role, which is what is recommended, or using access keys. Which is not the recommended approach, but what I've opted to do for my setup here. Near real time supports and requires an SQS queue. If you are using near real time, we recommend having a dedicated SQS queue such that any existing implementation you have or existing integrations with other upstream systems or consuming systems um, will not interfere with the enrichment process, or the enrichment process will not interfere with existing integrations. So having a separate queue that's only being consumed and having messages purged from by these recipes is recommended. Keep things separate and clean. So that's where I would establish a connection to SQS if I was going to use near real time. In my sandbox here, I've enabled all the modes. So this is what it would look like. There's a connection to S3 as well. This is utilized for the batch process. This is just basically telling RIH that it can connect to S3 buckets. And in the batch mode of operation, um, you'll the recipes are uploading to a DNB owned bucket, and the authentication and authorizations handled by the recipe. So you have like that token exchange occurring there. Lastly, you'll need the Reltio platform connection. So this should be a set of client credentials that has access to the tenant. So you'll have a client ID and a client secret. In my case, I chose to name the client ID as the MB enrichment process. And if I come navigate back to my MDM hub, and I go, for example, to the activity log, I can see that the changes were made to this profile using by uh, a system account, or in this case, a programmatic account called DNB enrichment process. So by having a naming convention like that, you can keep the lineage accurate. So that's where the client credentials would come in, and that's it for connections. There are some core recipes that need to be enabled. So things like error handling, notification handling, recipe ops, again, for like observability. So those will need to be enabled. And then we actually separate the modes of operation into some different subdirectories. So I also have this job stats running, and then I have some different core recipes for the different modes. So for example, real time here, you have the core recipe and recipe logic running here. And then the triggers, I'll explain this in a few moments. I can have two triggers. If I'm using near real time, I have a SQS queue that's actually triggering this recipe. Or the on-demand buttons are actually making an API request to Reltio Integration Hub to kick off the recipe. And that request comes through basically the out-of-the-box buttons. Once these are configured, they will be able to make requests to RIH, to the appropriate RIH recipe, to make that near real-time call behind the scenes. So those are the trigger recipes. We have a similar concept for batch processing, different trigger types. So for batch, let's say you wanted to make a one-off batch request, you can actually use a scheduler of your choice or some integration tool, because we expose an endpoint in RIH, and as long as you have the correct token, you can make a request to this endpoint, and that will kick off a batch process or a batch enrichment in Reltio. So that's that REST API. And then a different way of triggering the batch mode of enrichment is using the scheduler trigger recipe. So for this guy, you would essentially need to modify a cron expression in RIH. And then this determines at what frequency or cadence the batch mode of enrichment is going to be scheduled at and actually be executed at. So you'd need to just modify a cron expression and start the recipe. And then we have a similar subdirectory for monitoring. This contains the recipes for monitoring, and monitoring again is that separate kind of mode of enrichment where it's more of a DNB initiated push based on that monitoring registration you have with DNB. So that's how we separate some of the artifacts within RIH. We also have a few properties, environment properties. So here I've set up the environment URL and the tenant ID. I've added my email address for job notifications. So I can actually receive notifications for um, when jobs are executed and when jobs are complete. And I can get some summary of how many records were transacted upon, how many records were sent to DNB, how many had a match that was found, and how many were ultimately updated in Reltio. So to receive that summary view, I need to have an email notification there. And for batch also, because it's a different API, you need to input a DNB customer key. So basically, once you have your API keys from DNB, there is a website that they have that you go in and you can generate this batch key and MD5 hashed key. So those need to be inputted in the properties if you're using batch. And then the final piece I'd like to show you is the configuration itself. So we have a lookup table called DNB recipe properties, and here we have parameterized, and you can configure some of um, the I suppose the functionality and the behavior of the enrichment itself. So for example, the first key value pair we see here is the organization entity type name. So here we're just saying that, hey, in our data model, the organization or the company is called organization. And when we write data from DNB, the source name in our tenant configuration is DNB. For batch, we need to create some logic or an export filter for the data we want to send to DNB. So the last time I ran this, for example, I wanted to send only a single record. So I set the filter to be equal to a record that has a DUNS number of this value. But on an ongoing basis, I might simply put in something that says where source not equals to DNB. And then when I run the batch mode of enrichment, I would be basically picking up all records that don't have any data contributed by DNB. So they're probably records that were not enriched already, or records that were created recently. So I just set that filter there, and then that's what is used on an ongoing basis for the batch mode of enrichment. We also put in that client credential name here. This is just to um, ensure that we avoid a infinite loop when updating records. We kind of suppress updates that come in through the integration, so that if we're using a mode like near real time, we make sure we're not sending the same record over and over again. So that's kind of that stop. And then we have some configurable properties, as you see here. So batch sizes, these are the batch sizes that, so the first one batch size here is for DNB batch submission. These are the batch sizes we are sending to DNB. So even though I may export 1 million records from Reltio to send to DNB, the recipe is going to take the 1 million records and chunk the results out into 5,000 batches of 5,000, and only send those to DNB in those smaller batches. And then similarly for monitoring, this is the maximum batch size that would be kind of picked up and processed at one go. Data blocks, these are what we support out of the box. We already covered company info and hierarchies and connections as core data blocks. Um, we also support diversity insights and principles and contacts out of the box. But let's say you did not choose to license those data blocks, that's totally fine. You would need to, however, come um, to the properties and set the data block to no, so that the requests do not include those data blocks as part of the request. And then because there are different product level versions, you also need to specify in the properties what the levels are. So in this case, the license that I have allows me to obtain level 3 information. So I've configured the block here to be level 3. If you choose to license level 1 or level 2 for company info, you can come in and set the value here. And similar thing holds true for the other data blocks. If you choose to license different versions, it's configurable. Here's that do not merge flag we spoke about at the beginning. If you set this flag to true, it will override the confidence codes and always write results in as a potential match. By default, this is set to false, and therefore, when you're enriching records, um, the behavior would be based upon the confidence codes. And this is something we spoke about earlier, but you see we have this potential match confidence code, which out of the box we've set to 6. What this means is anything that comes back as a match with a confidence code of, say, 5 or lower will be discarded. And in MDM, you'll get a status of no match found by DNB. If you then had a result that came in as a 6 or as a 7, then that result is written as a potential match. And that's what that parameter does. And then above it here, you see the auto merge confidence code. And we've set this to an 8. This is that higher confidence code threshold. And what we're saying here is if the result is actually an 8 or greater, max value of 10, the result will be automatically updated, or the master profile will be updated with that match result directly. So this is where you can configure those two thresholds. And then the last parameters you see down here are address type, email type, and phone type. Basically, as you know, these different data elements can have different types. So an address could be a shipping, mailing, business, and so on. Same thing with email and phone. When it comes to enrichment with DNB, we want to prioritize business values. And this also, could be determined by the values that your company chooses to use. You may have a different naming convention, but that's why we've chosen to parameterize this. You can actually select the value or the specific type of addresses, emails, or phones to prioritize. So the recipe will submit addresses, emails, or phones based off that type first. If it doesn't find those types, then it will just pick up the first address or email or phone that appears within that nested attribute or within the array. So that's pretty much it from an RH perspective. Again, the provisioning is just a simple import. Our provisioning team will import the package into RIH, and then you will be able to see immediately the artifacts, within RIH. And then after the package is deployed, that is when it is then turned back to either an SI partner or, or a customer to then go ahead with the configuration steps and actually enabling the functionality. So Again, Reltio will provision the package, but then it's up to the implementation team to configure and enable it because it requires some configuration and connections to be set up that obviously our teams do not have access to or do not know. So we've left configuration and enablement, in the hands of our customers. So quick time check. We have about 5 minutes left for questions. I do see. Let's see another question here from Chetan. So once we register to DMV data blocks, do we get any RH recipes and process? Yes. So basically, Chetan, when this product is licensed or you've obtained an entitlement for it, we will deploy the package in the tenants that you tell us to deploy it in. And then everything I just showed you here, you will see a project here with all the artifacts. So you will have all these recipes, and you will have a set of lookup tables that have been created, as well as some properties. Oh, I did also want to mention the API collection earlier. There's also an API collection here that we expose. So there's actually an endpoint here that is created as a result of enabling the API endpoint. But here is an endpoint, for example, for real time or near real time. And that's what is invoked by our UI buttons, for example. And similarly, we have one for batch, and you can actually use these endpoints to trigger batch externally from a calling application if you wanted to. But yes, you will receive all these artifacts as a result of that entitlement. Um, yeah, and the package being deployed to your environment.
Hey, Jacques, I have a quick question for you.
Yep.
It's Kurt. So in the near real-time mode, which is a new mode for us, right? Versus the legacy DMB connector. Can you talk a little bit more about the purpose and the behavior of the real-time mode? Like, for example, what kinds of events or or circumstances trigger it to wake up and do what it does?
Good question, Kurt. So the purpose of near real-time processing is to have a programmatic way to enrich records as they are created in Reltio. So of course, different implementations or different customer implementations have different integrations. We may have customers that utilize MDM, where source data is being brought in at some cadence, like weekly, nightly, I don't know, monthly, quarterly, right? So for those customers, real-time mode of operation might not make much sense. They would be better served by batch. Um, but for customers that are integrated and are leveraging kind of that API first approach, customers that have integrations with Reltio where records are constantly being created or updated, and if the customer has those requirements that they might need the records to be enriched, within minutes of them being created in MDM, then that's where near real time shines because it's a programmatic way of getting the enrichment. Um, it's not really a trickle feed, but you can kind of think of it that way, right? It depends on like how many records you're loading into Reltio, but as those are coming in, within seconds to minutes, they're going to be enriched. So that's the value of real time. Now, with respect to the trigger here is simply going to ingest messages from an SQSQ that's been configured out of the box, and that SQSQ is configurable. Remember how I recommended having a separate queue in your tenant? So in my tenant, I have a dedicated queue for this. I can maybe bring that up. Okay. Can I shift from here? Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know what's happening with console, but basically in your SQSQ configuration, you have a configurable type filter, right? So I have a type filter that's only sending organizations, and I'm only sending organizations that have an associated event or where the generating event was uh, profile created and profile changed. So essentially, anytime the way I have it set up, and again, it's configurable based on business needs, but the way I have it set up is an organization record that has been created or changed, and where the say DUNS number is missing or where the source is not equals to DNB. Those are my criteria for my streaming destination for SQS, and therefore those are the organizations that ultimately will be sent to DNB for enrichment. So there's an element of configurability there.
I get it. Very good. Thank you.
You are welcome. Okay, we are up on time. We'll wrap this up here. I don't know, Sarah, if you have any closing remarks, but I want to thank everyone for their time and for joining us today on this community webinar. I hope you've learned more about our product.
Yes, thank you so much, Jacques. Just as a quick reminder, we do have data-driven coming up in 2025 in February. So if anyone is interested, please register. You can find the registration right on the community page, the main community page as well. So thank you everybody for joining. We look forward to seeing you at the next community show, which will be in January.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Al.
Bye-bye.